The truth is, I never cared about my health until the Aethel Mirror came out. I'm a skeptic, but I'm also a consumer. I'm the kind of person who believes in the next big thing. And the Aethel, they called it the next evolution of self-awareness, promised to be just that. It wasn't just a mirror. It was a complete diagnostic suite. A seamless, full-length obsidian rectangle that mounted flush to the wall, capable of scanning your skin's micro-vibrations, analyzing your cortisol levels by measuring pupil dilation, and calculating your real-time cardiac risk, all while you were just tying your shoes. It was sleek, expensive, and utterly modern. It was the perfect addition to my otherwise minimalist, high-tech apartment. The first few weeks were fascinating. It tracked my sleep quality, gently suggesting I switch to a low blue light setting on my devices after 9. It analyzed my gait and detected a slight habitual leaning to the left, prompting me to adjust my posture. Its voice was a calm, disembodied female alto. It never got shrill, never passed judgment. It was just data. I love the data. I love the feeling of being in total control, of having a hidden digital guardian watching over my body's fragile mechanics. It was a Tuesday, last Tuesday to be precise, when the first alarm sounded. I'd just woken up, feeling perfectly rested, and was standing in front of it in a pair of sweatpants, running a hand through my hair. The Aethel's display, normally a simple white font on the pure black glass, suddenly turned ochre. A large flashing warning dominated the screen. Stress levels, critical. I frowned. I felt great. The deadline for my last project was yesterday. I was essentially on vacation. I told the mirror, using the subtle voice command protocol, that I felt fine. Its voice replied, a little slower than usual. It explained that its proprietary biometric scanner was detecting a severe spike in adrenal activity, a rapid, erratic pulse, and a corresponding drop in core body temperature. Your subjective feeling of calm, it stated, is in direct conflict with your physiological data. Please seek immediate rest and isolation. I spent the next hour trying to argue with a sheet of intelligent glass. I walked away, did some chores, had a calm cup of tea, and returned. The warning was still there, now accompanied by another. Elevated heart rate, 115 BPM. I placed 2 fingers on my wrist, 65. I was calm, my pulse was normal. I took my Apple Watch, put it on, and tapped the heart rate function. 64 beats per minute. I looked back at the Aethel. 115. I was instantly irritated. It was a faulty sensor, a terrible, expensive flaw in a product I had trusted completely. I contacted customer service immediately, filing an aggressive complaint about the dangerous misinformation it was broadcasting. I was prepared to demand a replacement. The next day, Wednesday, the stress warning was gone. I was relieved, assuming a back-end update had fixed the calibration. I spent the morning in front of the mirror, doing a gentle stretching routine, and the Aethel simply tracked my muscle recovery and joint flexibility with its usual detached precision. The world felt normal again. The false calm was soothing. I had rationalized the whole thing as a software bug, and the dread had vanished. It was mid-afternoon when the real disruption happened. I was standing there scrolling through my phone, barely looking at the glass, when the mirror's voice cut in, its pitch now a low, unsettling monotone. Warning, unknown entity detected behind you. The air in the room didn't change, but my blood turned to ice. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. I didn't move my body. I only moved my eyes, scanning the empty, modern apartment visible in the reflection. It was just me. The minimalist white walls, the sleek, low sofa, the sunlight cutting across the polished floor. Nothing. I was entirely alone. Explain yourself, I commanded the mirror, my voice barely a whisper. Analysis confirms a distinct, non-corporeal energy signature registering 1.5 meters behind your current location. The signature is moving slowly, highly irregular. Recommend immediate repositioning. I still couldn't move. My muscles had locked up, a primal refusal to turn my back on what might be there. Instead, I did the stupidest, most modern thing possible. I took a wide-angle picture of the reflection with my phone. The moment the flash fired, I whirled around. Nothing. Just the empty space where the mirror had said something was. I looked down at the photo on my phone. The digital image was clean. It showed my reflection in the empty room behind me. My face in the photo looked pale, eyes wide and fixed on the mirror. I looked back at the Aethel. the warning had vanished. It was simply displaying my current body fat percentage. False calm. I told myself it was an April Fool's joke programmed into the software, or a developer's prank they had forgotten to remove. An elaborate, deeply tasteless feature. I tried to dismiss it, but the knot of cold dread in my stomach was now tighter than any anxiety the mirror had tracked. This was the core rule I was establishing for myself. The mirror was showing me a reality that contradicted my physical senses. The mirror's reality was becoming a horror, and I was forced to choose between believing my own eyes or believing the cold, hard data. The mirror went back to its normal routine for a few hours. I convinced myself it was a fluke, a massive data corruption event. I even joked about it to a friend in a text message, calling my new gadget a paranormal activity detector. I was trying to normalize the terror, to put the genie back in the bottle. Then came the first visual distortion. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. I was walking past the mirror in the dark, heading for a glass of water. The Aethel has a motion sensor that causes it to wake up when you get close, displaying a dim outline of your form. As I approached, I saw myself in the reflection. My body was a faint, luminous outline. But just behind my left shoulder, where the wall should have been a flat, featureless black, there was a smudge. It was a figure, tall and thin, but blurry, like a bad photograph of something moving too fast. It was just a shape, a slight distortion in the reflection of the light coming from the hallway. It was too indistinct to make out details, but it was there undeniably. It was a faint, elongated shadow that didn't belong to me, and it was standing unnervingly close to my reflected self. I froze. I stared at the spot in the glass. The mirror's voice whispered, a low mechanical hiss. Suggestion, do not maintain eye contact with the reflection. Move away. I did the opposite. I stepped closer, peering into the glass. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, a silent, parasitic shape attached to my shadow. It didn't look back at me. It only seemed to look at the reflected me. And then, as if its energy source had flickered, the shape vanished. The glass was again a perfect empty black mirror, showing only my solitary outline. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, making the sound I knew the Aethel had tracked earlier. The room was empty. The corner was empty. Nothing was there. The sudden drop back to a false calm, the total lack of physical evidence, was more frightening than the shape itself. It meant the thing was only visible in the mirror. It was only visible through the lens of objective digital reality. I spent the rest of the night with the lights on, sitting in the living room, trying to find a similar phenomenon online. Ghost in the machine? Software artifact? A strange form of digital pareidolia? Nothing matched. Everything I read about the Aethel praised its perfect, unglitchable clarity. By Thursday, I was functioning on no sleep and pure adrenaline. I couldn't bear to look at the mirror, but I also couldn't stay away from it. It was like a magnet pulling me toward a visual infection. I needed to know if it was still malfunctioning. I forced myself to stand in front of it in full daylight. The screen was a relief. It simply showed a detailed analysis of my posture and suggested a minor adjustment to my standing weight distribution. I thought I was safe. But then the sound. The Aethel had a sophisticated multi-directional microphone array. It often used it to calibrate acoustic dampening for its internal speakers. Now it seemed to be listening to something else entirely. I began to hear it, not with my ears, but through the mirror's own external speakers. A faint, low-frequency whispering. It sounded distant and muffled, like a crowd of people talking just on the edge of audibility, or a radio picking up a distant, distorted frequency. The Aethel displayed a new data point at the bottom of the screen. Ambient noise, 0.003 B. Source, unlocated. It was tracking a noise that was physically too quiet for me to hear. A noise existing almost in the vacuum of the room. A subsonic, psychic chatter. I moved my head slowly, trying to locate the source with my own senses. Nothing. Total silence in the apartment. But the mirror's internal audio continued to play the low, indistinct chatter. Then the whispering focused. It shifted from a crowd to a single drawn-out sound, like a long, sad sigh escaping from a small, dry hole. The mirror's alto voice cut across the sound. Audio analysis, sub-vocal frequency detected. Linguistic content, repetitive negation. In other words, it was hearing a word being repeated, a word that meant no. I felt a genuine panic bloom in my chest, and this time, the Aethel's reflection of my face confirmed it. My pupils were wide, my jaw was tight, and a faint flush was visible on my neck. My heart rate jumped to 130. Now finally, my physical reality matched the mirror's digital reality. The fear was real because the thing was real. As the auditory horror peaked, I saw a flicker in the glass. A tiny, almost unnoticeable distortion in the reflection of the light fixture above me. It was like a shimmering heat haze concentrated in a small, spherical space near the ceiling. It didn't look like a human figure. It looked like an orb of pure visual static. The mirror's voice was now strained, a crackling sound of static introduced into its digital calm. Stress levels, dangerous. Unknown entity classification, aggressive. Suggest immediate evacuation. I stumbled back, my feet catching on the rug. I didn't wait to see if the orb would move. I grabbed my coat and my keys and I fled the apartment. I'm sitting in my car now, parked a block away, watching the reflection of my apartment in the rearview mirror. It's dark. The windows look like black, empty eyes. My hands are shaking too much to start the engine, and the silence in the car feels loud, but at least it's my silence. I don't know what to do. I'm starting to think this isn't a glitch, but a secret. Like the mirror is some kind of cursed, hypersensitive camera, showing me what the developers found and then hid. If you're listening to this, maybe you can help. I need to know if anyone else has one of these. Maybe the data is stored in the cloud. If you can hear this, like this video, think of it as a signal flare, a digital warning that this thing is out there. Share it with anyone you know who has one. I need to know if I'm going crazy or if this mirror has shown me the true layer of reality that's been walking beside me all along. The thing in the glass is still in my apartment. I have to go back in. I have to find the source. I need to know what happens when you turn your back on a secret like this. I went back in the late Friday afternoon. I had a theory, a desperate hope based on my desire for a technological solution. If the mirror was a sensor, maybe I could overload it. Maybe I could break the window it was opening. I'd bought a professional-grade EMF reader and a powerful spotlight. My plan was to flood the area with so much data and light that the subtle, lurking entity would either be revealed as a fraud or simply vanish under the strain of being fully seen. I placed the spotlight facing the wall that was opposite the mirror, set the EMF reader on a tripod, and flipped the light on. The room exploded in a harsh, clinical white glare. I approached the Aethel cautiously. The mirror was now displaying data I hadn't seen before. Ambient electromagnetic field, extreme. Visual recalibration, active. The reflection was momentarily a pure white wash, blinding me. When the display resolved, the image was different. It wasn't the reflection of a perfectly lit, empty room anymore. The mirror had defiltered the world. The bright light did not make the entities vanish. It made them clear. Standing in the reflection, in the very real, stark white light, were 5 distinct figures. They weren't shadows anymore. They were like a terrible, physical manifestation of digital noise. They looked like people, but subtly wrong. Their faces were stretched too long. Their fingers were mere black lines, and their bodies were a constant, barely visible shimmer, like an old VHS tape being played through a broken VCR. They were standing everywhere I had just been. One near the door, one in the kitchen doorway, and 2, the closest, were hovering right behind me, their elongated, indistinct heads bent low, looking at the back of my own reflected neck. I didn't turn around this time. I couldn't. My physical eyes saw a pristine, empty apartment. The blinding spotlight was hitting the empty wall, and the EMF reader was silent. But the mirror was showing me a reality that was crawling with the dead, or the hidden, or the things that live between the light waves. My physiological data flashed red, pupil dilation max. Cortisol spike, unprecedented. The 2 figures behind me began to lean closer in the reflection. I could almost hear the whispering again, but it was now amplified, sounding like sand pouring through a microphone. I finally understood the rule of the mirror. It wasn't an image of my room. It was a digital capture of the electromagnetic field and the residual thermal energy in the space, stitched together to show me a true objective picture of the room. And in that objective picture, these things were standing right there. They had always been there. The Aethel's voice returned, but it was now a low, chilling, inhuman sound, slowed down, like a voice on a tape recorder running out of battery. Hypothesis confirmed. Entities have been present since inception. Your ocular cerebral filters have been negating their presence. The mirror shows the truth. I started to weep, a choked, silent sob. It wasn't a glitch. It was a window. A hyper-advanced lens that could see the energy forms my brain had evolved to ignore. The mirror began to display a countdown timer. Entity proximity critical. Biological filters failing. 3 minutes until full sensory perception. In 3 minutes, I wasn't going to need the mirror anymore. My brain's protective dam was about to burst, and I was going to see everything. The shapes, the whispers, the cold, creeping presence with my own eyes. I was going to lose the ability to pretend I was alone. I stared into the glass, watching the two figures right behind me. Their forms were solidifying, the shimmering static resolving into something that looked horrifyingly like calcified flesh. The reflection of my face was frozen in a mask of silent terror. The countdown reached 0. The moment the counter hit 0, the Aethel didn't make a sound. It didn't flash a new warning. The visual was the same. The room, bathed in harsh white light, still held the 5 blurry, wrong-looking entities. I held my breath, waiting for my own eyes to betray me. I waited for the room to fill with the cold, the whispering, the horror I now knew was there. But nothing happened. The room remained silent. My physical eyes still saw a clean, empty apartment. I let out a shuddering breath. The protection hadn't failed. My brain's filter was still operating. The sensory firewall was holding. I was safe for now. But the clock was ticking because the Aethel was still working, still watching me. I decided that the only way to escape this was to destroy the device. If the window was closed, the illusion of safety would return. I turned to grab a hammer I kept in a kitchen drawer. As I turned, I was aware of the space where the 2 entities had been, right behind my neck. I felt nothing, saw nothing. The relief was intoxicating. I was running to the kitchen, toward the promise of blessed ignorance. But the Aethel was still on the wall, and as I walked away, I saw my own reflection diminish in the distance. The figures behind me, the ones I had been watching for hours, were still there. They didn't move as I moved. They didn't follow me. They simply stood in the same spot, frozen in a state of eternal, unblinking surveillance. I stopped dead in the hallway. I walked back slowly, my eyes locked on the reflection. I got close to the mirror, and the 5 shapes were immediately behind my reflected self. I took a step to the left. The reflection of my body moved, but the 5 entities did not. They stayed in the same physical space in the reflection, despite my movement. The chilling final realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The entities weren't following me. They weren't attached to me. They were attached to the house. The mirror wasn't showing me the ghosts I had brought in. It was showing me the ghosts that had always been here, rooted in the very structure of the apartment, and my human eyes had simply evolved to ignore them as harmless, ambient noise. My brain filtered out the sight of 5 silent, watchful spirits that were permanently embedded in the electromagnetic texture of the hallway. The Aethel hadn't broken my reality. It had simply removed the comfortable, biological lie I told myself every day. And the reason the stress levels were critical, the heart rate elevated, and the sense of a presence was constant, was because my subconscious had been seeing them all along. The primal, non-cognitive part of my brain had been screaming in terror at the 5 wrong-shaped things in the hallway, and the Aethel, being a purely objective data machine, was simply broadcasting my body's hidden, overwhelming terror. I looked at the largest entity, the one by the door. It was a permanent fixture, silently standing guard. The Aethel's voice, now a perfectly normal, calm alto, spoke a final analysis. Recommendation: do not attempt to destroy the device. The data will remain. The entities are localized. You are now aware. Awareness is permanent. Do you wish to enable permanent objective visualization? I looked from the mirror to the empty hallway, and then back to the mirror and the 5 silent residents of my home. If I smashed the mirror, I would stop seeing them, but I would know they were still there. I would know I was sharing my bed with the ghosts that looked like static, and my heart would never stop pounding in my sleep. But if I said yes, if I enabled the permanent objective visualization, I would have to look at them every single day. I would have to watch their blurred forms stand guard, knowing that my own mind was fighting a constant, losing battle against the pure, terrifying truth of the world. I didn't answer the question. I just stood there, paralyzed between the horrifying knowledge and the comforting lie. The mirror displaying the silent, permanent presence of the entities that own my home. I haven't slept in 3 days. I just watched the mirror. And the 5 things that watch me back. The mirror, I now know, is just the first window. A digital peephole into a reality that is older, colder, and far more crowded than we can imagine. Was it a curse or just science finally catching up to the dark? I don't know. I guess we'll never know. Unless you join me next time for the story of the old computer that started printing the names of everyone who was about to die.